In this session, I am going to be talking about how the feudal system worked and how William I used that in order to control England. So key words that we're going to be using today are king, who is the ruler of the country, so there's a male heir, obviously queen being the female equivalent. Barons, who are the wealthy landowners. We've got knights, who are the experienced and highly trained soldiers within the country. And then finally we have peasants, who usually work off the land. They are poor and they make up the majority of the population at this point in history. So, we've been looking at how William controlled England. We've looked at castles, we've looked at the harrying of the north and using fear in order to control the country. This week we're going to look at the feudal system, which was William's attempt of controlling the country not through fear, but by winning over trust and support. In order to do this, he used the one resource which he had, which would have been desired by all in the country, that resource being land. Land's very important because you can not only build your house to survive, you can also grow crops, and it is very valuable to have, particularly 1,000 years ago. So, at the very top of the feudal system we have the king. In this case it is William. He owned all of the land in England and he used that to keep control over the people. Some of that land he gave to the church in order to win their support and as thanks to the Pope for supporting his claim. The rest of the land then, some he would keep for himself, but then a lot of it he split off to the wealthy lords of the land known as the barons. Now, the reason he did this was in return for the lands, the barons agreed to swear an oath to protect the king at all cost. Now, what that means is they have entered into an agreement where they agree to protect the king in times of war. So if he needs to call on the barons for protection, they are bound to do that. If they don't, then they can have their lands taken away. And as a lot of their income and power comes from the land, they are going to support the king wherever possible. In order to do this though, the barons would need some help. So in return, they would then give some of that land which they'd received from the king to the knights. So the knights would be the next section in the feudal system. In return for this land from the barons, the knights promised to fight for the barons whenever called on. So if the king needs armies for war, then he calls on the barons, and the barons will then call upon the knights to organise and make up the core of the army. The knights would then sometimes give a little bit of land to the peasants in the region. They would also agree to protect the peasants, who are the last people on our feudal system. In return for this, the peasants agree to work on the knight's land and, if required, fight in the army. So this is going to keep the peasants very, very busy. I'm now going to quickly talk you through how that works in diagram form, so you've got some sort of visual representation of the different levels of the feudal system. So here is the visual representation of how the feudal system works. So you can see it's in a pyramid formation. At the very top of the feudal system we have the king. So the king is the top of this pyramid. The king, directly below the king, is the wealthy landowners known as the barons. So that's who we're going to put on the second level. The king is going to provide the barons with land. So the barons are going to be getting some land from the king. In return for this, the barons are swearing an oath to protect the king. So if there's a war, then they will protect him. As well as that, they are going to provide him with money in order for him to be able to do it. Next, under the barons, we have the knights. The knights, just the same as the barons did, are also going to be given land. In return to this, they are going to agree to fight and lead the barons' armies. Finally, on the last step of the system, at the bottom, we have the peasants, who make up the majority of the population. The peasants are going to agree to work and, if needed, fight for the knights. In return for this, sometimes some of the peasants will get some land, but all of the peasants will get some element of protection. And that is how the feudal system works and what it looks like in diagram form. So, the feudal system helped William control England for a few reasons. Firstly, everyone's getting something. No one's being left out, everyone is getting something in this system. Everyone's getting some amount of land based on their position, so obviously the barons would get more land than the knights and so on. This meant that people are going to be happy. People who are happy are less likely to rebel, which means that William had a more secure position because his people are feeling supported, they're feeling happy. The king then is going to be able to be in a much stronger position because he has got the barons to protect him. If they break their oath to protect him, then they can simply the king can take their land away and give it to someone else and make a new baron. So it's in the baron's best interest to support the king. On the opposite end, the peasants are now going to be very, very busy working the land. They aren't going to have time and energy to spare to rebel. So all in all, this system is making William much more secure in his position as king of the country. Hopefully that's helped. So the task that I'd like you to complete based on that information is, number one, you're going to create your own diagram of the feudal system. So that needs to have the inner information of the 4 different levels, and you need the information on the outside, which includes who gives and what they get in return. You are welcome to add your own colours and diagrams and really make these your own, or if you want to, I have attached through the assignments on Teams the outline that I used in the demonstration, which you are welcome to use instead. Task 2, I would like you to explain why this system helps William keep control of England. So make sure for this one you're answering in full sentences, paragraphs, and you're including specific explanation of how it's helping him keep control. So why are people being controlled? Lastly, if you finish all that and you have some time to spare, then your extension is to answer the question, what are some of the limitations of the feudal system? So by limitations we mean how it might fail, what could go wrong, the problems. So this one we haven't spoken about, so you're making more of a prediction and using informed decision making to decide what the problems could be for this system. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at the usual place and I'll respond when I can.